friends, and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be making this lovely cranberry cardigan. Honestly, maybe one of my favorite knits that I've done so far. I know I say that about every one of them, but each one should be better than the last, right? I just love everything about this cardigan. I love the difference in color. I like the way that it fits, the way that it sits. It's a little oversized, but not swallowing me, which I really like. So this cardigan is actually the medium. So if you want to grab the pattern and make exactly what I made, go for the medium, but it actually comes in sizes extra small to 2XL. The tutorial is kind of long, so because of how long the tutorial ended up turning out to be, I went ahead and I chopped it into two parts, a part 1 and a part 2. So stay on the lookout for the part 2 coming soon, but it follows the same process and the same progression as the pattern. So go ahead and grab the pattern from my Etsy and follow along here at the tutorial. I will see you guys at the end when you have your lovely cranberry cardigan. We're going to start with the main back panel. We're going to pick up our desired number of stitches with waste yarn. To do that, I like to push every other needle into work and then knit up from that for a few rows and then push all of the needles we need into work. And I'm going to knit 60 rows just as normal. Now we add a stitch marker to both sides of the panel. This is going to help us when we have to knit the sleeves. We're going to repeat the following pattern 3 times. We're going to knit 2 and then make a fully fashioned decrease on both sides of the panel. By the time you're done, your RC is going to equal 66. After that, we're going to start on a new pattern, which we're going to repeat 4 times. And this one is that you knit 8 rows and then you make a fully fashioned decrease on both sides. And by the time you're done with that, your RC is going to equal 98. Now we knit 16 rows as normal. And now we're going to find the center 20 stitches and we are going to mark those with some stitch markers. And finally, we're going to cast off with waste yarn, and that's the end of our back panel. Now we do the same as what we did for the back panel to the front right panel. I just knit as normal with my main color A for 60 rows. And then we added our stitch markers and followed the same pattern of decreasing, so like we do 3 repeats of knitting 2, decreasing, but because we're only doing half a panel, you're only going to want to decrease on one side. Then we're going to want to do 4 repeats of knitting 8 and decreasing 1. Next, depending on your size, we're either going to knit 0 rows, knit 2 rows, or knit 4 rows as normal. Now we're going to work the neckline shaping. Put your center 5 stitches into hold, knit 1, wrap your yarn around the most recent needle pushed out into hold, knit 1, and then push another needle out into hold, and we're going to repeat that 13 times. Now we want to cast off just our needles that are out into the hold position. You can do this a couple of ways. You can either hand knit with waste yarn, or you can set your carriage to the P position and knit it that way. As long as you keep pushing those needles out into position E, they will be knit by the machine as long as your carriage is in P. I like to do a good amount of rows here because it is pretty unnerving if this unravels. You basically have to restart a huge chunk of your piece. Now I set my row counter back to 0, and we're going to make increases on the side that we just created our hold stitches on. So we're going to increase 1, knit 2, and we're going to do that until RC equals 16, or that would be 8 repeats of this pattern. And now we just cast off with waste yarn. And then we will start with our main body panel for the left side. Okay, row counters at 0, tension dials at 4.5. Gonna knit 60 rows. Okay, that's 60 rows. And now we're going to do our decreases. Real quick editor's note here. These decreases are supposed to be on the left side of your panel. I accidentally made two copies of the right panel, so yeah, do the decreases on the left side, followed by more decreases on the left side, and we'll go from there. Oh, shoot, I also forgot to add a stitch marker, but we can find that pretty easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, now we're gonna knit 8 and then decrease 1 and do that 4 times. And then we're going to start working on the neckline and shoulder shaping, just like what we did on the other panel, except flipped. So we're going to put 5 of our stitches out into hold, and then we're going to start doing the pattern of knitting one and wrapping one, and then putting one out into hold. We're going to repeat that pattern a total of 13 times. And now using waste yarn, we're going to cast off all those stitches that we have out on hold. And then we're going to start working the increases where we just did on hold stitches. So we're going to start by increasing 1 and then knitting 2 rows, and we're going to repeat that pattern a total of 8 times. Now, depending on size, we're going to knit our extra rows. For this next step, we are going to seam together the shoulder seam and the main back panel. Start by putting the main back panel back onto your needles, but with right side facing. And then, as you can see here, I've already picked up the left side. If you're having a hard time understanding which side should go on which, if you kind of pull this out, you can see the neckline, and if you flip this up, you can imagine what it will look like when it's seamed together. So now I'm going to show you how you pick up the other side of the panel and put it on your stitches over here. Okay, so these 2 markers that we put with the extra stitches in the middle, that's kind of about where our panel will end / begin. And obviously the other stitch that we'll end with is the opposite end of the panel. So it just depends on what end you would prefer to start on. I like to do a little bit of both sides so that it can hang on its own. Okay, and then start on the right side because we know for sure that these are accurate, and just pick it up as we go along. Okay, and now we're just going to cast off with our standard bind off. to knit the collar, we're going to put all our stitches onto our needles. These here with these yellow waste yarn bits, that was the collar for the front. This is the increases we did to come around the back of the neck. And then this is the part that we cast off, the like main back panel. And then same on the other side. So for here, I didn't pick up every stitch. I actually picked up every other stitch. So there's 8 stitches for these sections with the increases that don't have like an easy way to pick up how many stitches you're supposed to do. Also in the center, I only picked up 18 because when we were seaming them together, what I ended up doing is doing an extra stitch over so that it would kind of seam together better, hopefully, and without a hole. So from here, we would start knitting our neckline. We would knit as many rows as we want, and then we would drop our stitches down and make the ribbing, and then fold it back over. Now that we have all of our stitches around our collar picked up, we're going to set our tension dial to 4 and our row counter to 0. So we are going to knit 10 rows with this tension dial at 4. Okay, and then we're going to set our tension dial to 5 and knit 1 row. And we're going to set our tension dial back to 4 and knit 10 more rows. Okay, and now we just work our ribbing as normal. So drop every 3rd stitch. Oh. All right, and then we just knit our way back up with our latch hook. All right, and now we are going to fold over our ribbing. So we're basically going to pick up all the corresponding stitches and put them on the same corresponding needles. Okay, so the first 2 are always a little extra tricky because the beginning and the end stitches are just a little sticky. So grab those. So a good rule of thumb to tell if you're on the right track is you can see here that my next stitch I want to put on the needle is this one, which is a row that we knit up with our latch hook, and that should correspond here, because you can tell that like it rolls all the way down. So if the next one that you're going to put on your needle is also a ribbed row, and you kind of have to pull it out from underneath your row, that's just a good way to be able to keep track if you are, you know, one stitch off or right on track. Okay, and now we just cast off, and this is a good time to either use the elastic thread or the nylon cord, either that you prefer. I think I'll go with the elastic thread just to keep it looking pretty, because the nylon cord works very well, but then it's this blaring white cord essentially at the back of your sweater, which wouldn't be too bad for a normal sweater, but since this one is like open, a cardigan, and you can see it, I'm gonna stick with just our regular elastic. And this is optional, you don't have to use the elastic. Thank you for watching part 1 of the tutorial. I had planned for this to be a design process and tutorial video, and then I started editing them as if it was one video, and I was like, this is going to be 2 hours long. So to make it more digestible, I broke it up into tutorial and then pattern design process. And then I also split the tutorial into 2 because it ended up being like an hour long, and I felt like that was just too long to be like easily digested by the internet. So part 2 will be coming soon. Go ahead and check that out for the rest of how you knit this pattern. Thank you so much for checking out part 1. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. I try to check those like once a week and make sure that I help anybody who has any questions. The link for the pattern is in the description. Go ahead and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Hello, friends. Oh my God.